You know, we got a black fella from Georgia coming on who had a gun at his own business, and people complained, so the cops said, well, why don't you get a concealed carry? So he got that, and they came and arrested him and haven't given him his gun back or any of it, and a bunch of other stuff. And see, I'm as offended if it was a black person, a white person, or whatever. In fact, I never even, when I first heard about it on the radio, I didn't think, is it a black person, is it a white person? I just thought of somebody having their rights violated. It's like that lady, that black lady that got scared at the checkpoint, and so they chased her down and killed her. I immediately came on and said, this is the tyranny of Washington and the paranoia of terrorism and this police state. And I literally saw YouTube comments, and I showed them on air, and comments on InfoWars saying she was driving a nice car. You're just mad that some white lady got killed. Because that was right during the Trayvon Martin thing, or at the end of it. People were so racially charged up. And then when it turned out she was a black lady, I had such an outpouring of liberal blacks then loving me, like I defended a black lady. I didn't even think, what color is this woman? They just killed some woman in front of her kid who was unarmed. I just don't get it. I mean, you bleed red, I'm for you. And it's so frustrating to see the people. Anyways, I'm ranting. 800-259-9231. We want to hear from folks with their take on South Africa. If you live there, or even if you visited, or if you're a historian, your take on it. I see a lot of callers coming in, Jim in Texas and others who lived in South Africa. But we've got some other news we've got to hit on two different fronts. And DrudgeReport.com has a red link to our article about thumb scanning in these prison tunnels that lock you in at the airport. Those are going into more airports. That's an incredible story we've got to cover. But this West Point traitor, this globalist operative in Esquire saying, you know, the military will get our guns, break down this information.
Well, you know, Alex, what he was writing his essay in Esquire essentially about was a 2010 Supreme Court decision, Heller versus D.C. Now, that was a Supreme Court decision that established, as according to a 5-4 decision, that the Second Amendment is about an individual right. And, of course, that's really the crux of the debate. People on the authoritarian left have tried to portray this as something that is a right that belongs to government. And that's the tack that this guy, who was a West Point history instructor, that's the tack that he's taking throughout his entire article. He says, my job at the end of the day is about killing, and I orchestrate violence, but my profession is about directed violence on behalf of the nation. But see, the way that he defines the nation is the federal government, not the individual people. And to say that the Bill of Rights, especially the Second Amendment, is about establishing powers for the government is just amazingly an amazing lie, because the entire 10 Bill of Rights was about individual rights. And then they summed it up with the 10th Amendment and said, oh, no, by the way, if we haven't given anything specifically to the government, it's still reserved to the people and to the individual states. And so,
and by the way, the Violence Policy Center 13 years ago, in the front page of the Dallas, the Austin American Statesman, whenever we caught bribery at the Capitol, they literally in the paper quoted the head of the Violence Policy Center, and he said, it doesn't matter what Mr. Jones does. He's going to die, and with him, his Second Amendment. We've got your kids in the schools. And then here's this West Point professor, she's in the article, because I see it on Infowars.com, saying, doesn't matter, we're going to get your guns anyways, but for sure when you die. And so it is about killing a culture. And it's so sick that this guy shows Marxist training when they say, we've got your kids. And I can't believe we just turn our kids over to these people. Go ahead.
That's right. And, of course, at West Point, he taught history because he's about shaping the worldview. That's why he believes that he can take the guns from your cold, dead hand. He says he hopes that he doesn't have to kill you. Of course, he will if he has to. He'll tell his
and he
has to, but he thinks,
and it's worse.
Inherit it. Yeah. Yeah.
And it's worse. It's worse. The scandal is, why are they putting these people in everywhere?
Yes.
You know, it just came out 2 weeks ago that the person teaching history and law and a bunch of other stuff at another West Point type installation, one of the biggest in the country, Texas A&M. And it's not just this one professor. The bunch of them are doing it. They're bringing him in and literally saying, we're going to take your guns. And she said the rest of the Bill of Rights, free speech, everything.
That's right. Well, and of course, this guy is writing for Esquire. He's also written for the Small Wars Journal. And if you remember back to the summer of 2012, there was a lot said about an article that they had called Full Spectrum Operations in the Homeland, A Vision of the Future. Do you remember that? where they were saying...
Yes, when they said they're preparing for war with the Tea Party.
That's right. The Tea Party was taking over after hard times and a bad economy. They had taken over one town, and so this was their gaming scenario, how they were going to fight the Tea Party people who had taken over Darlington, South Carolina. Now, he didn't write that particular article, but he writes many, many articles for the Small Wars Journal. He's also...
But see, that's even more important. That's even more important. Again, it's infested. It's not this one guy. It's most of them. I mean, I'll turn on C-SPAN and see an Army War College briefing for generals. And I mean, it sounds like the most it sounds like a science fiction movie of the bad guys.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Well, and you know, so this is very relevant because you remember when we were down in San Antonio and you and Anthony Gucciardi were talking to the police chief because we had this open carry rally down there at the Alamo. And and you asked him, he's a, you know, point blank, you and Anthony were asking him, would you confiscate guns if you were ordered to do so? And he said, well, that's a hypothetical.
Just dropped.
See, they have hypothetical scenarios. That's exactly what they train in all the time is hypothetical scenarios. That's what the Small Wars Journal is about. It was about a hypothetical scenario where they could have the operation in the homeland, their vision of the future where they're fighting Tea Party people to confiscate their guns. So to say that I can't tell you whether I would confiscate your guns or not because that's a hypothetical scenario. Everything that they train with is hypothetical. And they are creating scenarios where the federal government, where the military is going against individual citizens because, as this fellow points out, he doesn't see it as an individual right. He sees it as...
Absolutely.
Right. And it's all about continuity of government. It's not about individual liberty.
We're going to go to phone calls now. Again, I'm hosting the broadcast. David Knight is popping in with expert analysis and breaking news. We'll have to get to the other news on Japan and warnings there that they're going under a fascist coup. Congress is having hearings on Obama being a dictator. The presidency is now a dictatorship by every measurement. We're going to go to that, but we have calls from Switzerland. We have calls from Texas. Both people lived in South Africa, so I'm going to skip this network break. I'm skipping this network break so that we have time to get to these callers and then also have David shift gears and get into other news. But if you hear me jumping in and getting upset, hearing all these West Point commanders teaching war with the Tea Party, we're going to take your guns, we're going to kill you. He actually says, we're going to take it from your hand. I mean, this is absolute sedition, absolute enemy infiltration. And Americans love to follow authority so much, they're going to try to have a Boer war here, folks. I'm telling you. They are going to come after the gun owners. And by the way, all you idiots that are going to side with them, you're going to be slaves when they're done, you idiots. Excuse me, I'm getting angry here, folks. I can't believe that our own military leadership is openly teaching treason and sedition and overthrow. They are criminal infiltrators. According to the Bill of Rights and Constitution, they have broken their oaths. They are involved in sedition. Thank you, David Knight. Let's talk to and chime in anytime you want on these gentlemen. Jim in Texas lived in South Africa. Then we'll talk to Swiss Mountain in Switzerland. Thank you for holding. Jim, you're on the air. Go ahead.
Hey, Alex. From the time I was born until I was 12 years old, I lived in Rhodesia in Victoria Falls from 68 until 80, until the government fell. And from that point on, I lived 5 years in Cape Town, South Africa. Now, as a young boy... Sir,
do me a favor. Back off your phone a little bit. It's overdriven. For those that don't know, Rhodesia was when the British captured the north area of South Africa, the northeast. They named it after their Illuminati chieftain who openly called for world government and who set up the Rhodes Scholarship. So you were born in Rhodesia. Go ahead.
Yes, that's correct. My father was in the Rhodesian Army. In fact, he was a captain in one of the companies in the Rhodesian African Rifles, which was a black and white unit, mixed battalions. Growing up, there was no racial strife whatsoever in Rhodesia. The Hosas and the Dabalis were the major black tribes. We lived in neighborhoods. I had black neighbors. I had, you call them colored. They were the ones that, you know, maybe had a white parent. There was interracial. There was no problem. No racial strife whatsoever until the Zanwa, Zimbabwean African National People's Liberation Army, communists who are Chinese-backed, began their insurgency from Zambia. Now, why is this important? Because Nelson Mandela was a Zanwa operative. They were the ones who set him up. Winnie Mandela and her little soccer boys, that they call them, were a bunch of little terrorists that would go around killing members of the Zulus and the Dabalis in South Africa that did not support their communist attitudes. Now, when after Rhodesia fell in 1980, my family, my father and my mother and my brothers and sisters and I moved to Cape Town, which is the English-speaking area, the British versus the Dutch area of South Africa, and my father became a policeman. What Mandela and his ilk would do is terrorize. They were cowards, Alex. They wouldn't attack the policemen in the police stations. They would kidnap and torture and terrorize the family members of the policemen. And when I hear people exclaiming how wonderful Nelson, and especially that evil woman, Winnie Mandela, when they are singing their praises, they wouldn't feel the same way if they would have had a family member, usually innocent children, coming home from the private schools that we were forced to go to. They would kidnap the children of police officers and set them on fire. These are 5- and 6-year-old little children that Winnie Mandela and Nelson Mandela and the other Zenla terrorists used to torture and kill.
And by the way, you point that out. I mean, of course he was part of that group. He was to be the king of that particular tribe. And notice I never even point that out. And that, again, they went around murdering other tribes of blacks that didn't want to be communist. You're absolutely right. That's mainline history. You lived it. And it's just crazy to sit there and see none of that on the news, and they are sanctifying him like he is the Saint Mary or something. I mean, I have never seen anything like it. What is it like for you living in the United States now? I guess you're a U.S. citizen now, it sounds like it. I can't even, hear your South African accent. What is it like to see people who I guarantee you can't even find South Africa on a map? I guarantee I would argue with you and call you a racist if you didn't literally put a tire around your child's head and burn that white devil for Mandela. Will you not kill your children now, sir, to show you're not racist?
There you go. Absolutely. And you can look at the Zulu tribes, which were very anti-Mandela. The Zulus were criticized for being part of the apartheid government, when in fact they were just very decent people. The Zulus never have been terrorists. The Zulus never have had any allegations of murdering white children or black children or anything. The Zulus are they have a very strong political...
they had a warrior code. They had a warrior, like a chivalry, like knights.
Exactly, and the Zulus did not care for any of the communists at all, and even the Zulu chiefs would denounce Mandela publicly, because of the methods he would use to try and end apartheid. All apartheid was, as you correctly stated, Alex, was the white tribe trying to maintain itself against the other black tribes. The blacks in South Africa, even to this day, are very tribal, and then they would criticize the whites, which are referred to as Europeans in Africa. White Africans are referred to as Europeans, even though I've never been to Europe. For us, for being tribal ourselves, we would be criticized while they would maintain their tribalism. So the Zulus were good. The communists, the Baileys and Hosas were not very good. They were terrorists. They were murderers. They were insurgents backed by the communist Chinese. And Nelson Mandela, now that he's dead, I hope he rots in hell and suffers pain for eternity for what he and Winnie Mandela did to innocent people.
All right, well, that's from somebody that lived it, and I'd love to hear from any, other South Africans, black South Africans. I don't care. All I know is I've studied it, and yeah, the Russians, the Chinese, on record, would go into African countries where there were basically no whites north of there, and would just kill everybody. I mean, it's like, well, when the Soviets kill Africans, it's loving and cutesy cute. And it's just, now look at South Africa, folks. It is a hell hole of communism now. But our media, you'd never know it. You would never know what South Africa's like now, because the foreign banks came in, the British Empire came in, they finally conquered it with political correctness. And I just wish that everybody would have worked together. I know they tried to with the Zulus to actually get real liberty and try to unify. But then once Mandela, he unified them around communism with sports. And then this soccer team or the rugby team went and met with him, and it was a white team, and then, they're all friends now. That was just for outside consumption, from what I've read. Let's talk to Swiss Mountain, who lived in South Africa. What is your take on all this and what the last caller said, Swiss Mountain?
Hi, Alex. It's nice to talk to you. Well, I think the previous caller romanticizes the Zulu nation a bit, even though I did vote for the Inkatha Freedom Party in the 94 elections. But, I mean, that election in itself is completely rigged. I just wanted to sort of mention a lesser-known point that P.W. Botha, before he went out, he was actually starting to move South Africa towards a system of the cantons as we have it in Switzerland or as you have the states in America. And I think that's one of the reasons why they took him out so quickly, why F.W. de Klerk just completely usurped the National Party back then and started working with Mandela to bring in the coalition government, which eventually led to ANC rule.
And again, for those that don't know, the average American literally can't even, I'm sorry, the average government-trained American cannot find their feet with both hands or their butt either. But for folks that don't know, you have the Inkatha group connected to the Zulus, and then you have the ANC, of course, with Mandela and the communists and the rest of them. Give us your take on living there and why you left and what you'd like to say to folks calling from Switzerland.
Well, I mean, we left. I left because it just got to the point where I wasn't safe anymore. And your gun rights were virtually zero. So for me to get a gun to protect myself was not the way to go. So I just decided, okay, I'll leave, thanks. The other reason why I left was because there was so much killing, and I'm not just talking killing where they go and they shoot somebody. They torture people. They torture people in the most horrendous, psychopathic ways before they finally let them die. There's an extermination happening in South Africa of white farmers. I don't know where these people are going to get their food from. They're most probably going to get genetically manipulated food from the UN. But it was just psychologically so horrendous to live there. I just had to leave.
Of course, other areas of Africa, they have exterminated all the whites, actually exterminated the few farmers that stayed behind and are now collapsing, like Zimbabwe. And again, the average American hears the word Zimbabwe and just thinks it's a foreign planet. What do you want to tell Americans that naively think that communism in Africa is a wonderful thing?
I want to tell them to read history and read lots of it. And the only thing I can say to the American listeners is there's so much love and support for you from all around the world. We're all in this together. I think Thomas Paine even said we're all Americans in this cause of liberty. And we've just got to keep on educating people. We've got to interject small pieces of information to those that are entirely numb and try to tune in on their level to raise them up even the slightest little bit. And apart from that, I'm so impressed with people running for local government in America. That's the way to take it back. Apartheid South Africa was the worst. If you were a black living under the apartheid regime, that's what you guys are fighting against right now. It was horrendous for the black people as well, because I grew up with them.
Well, I want to hear how bad apartheid was when we come back. We've got another guest coming on, but I want to give you 2 minutes to finish up, ma'am, and we'll be getting the guest on. But I want you to give that perspective as well. Please stay there. Don't hang up. Swiss Mountain.
Jakari Jackson here, and I want to talk to you for a second about water. You know about ProPure, our flagship water purification system, but check out some of our portable water filter products at InfoWarsStore.com. The clearly filtered water pitcher. Also, for those of you on the go, we have the Athlete Edition filtered water bottle and the RAD Eliminator Pro filtered sports bottle that removes radiation. And keep in mind, we have replacement filters for all of these products. The ever-popular grab-and-go bag favorite, the Life Straw, the Crystal Quest shower filter system, and the Aquapod kit, great for mass storage of water. And while you're at the InfoWars shop, pick up a copy of our latest book, 31 Days to Survival. You can find all this and more at the InfoWarsStore.com. And don't forget, it's your support that funds our operation. Sign up for our free newsletter at InfoWars.com/newsletter.
I'm right here with you, David. Thank you so much. And we've got a special guest coming up that the guys lined up from WSB TV. First reported businessman arrested for loitering, carrying legal gun on his own property in Atlanta, Georgia, or outside Atlanta. The good Californians, I guess, that have moved into the area, if they see anyone with a gun, they call the police, and the police say, look, doesn't matter if your gun's legal or not, we're going to take it because the Californians don't like seeing it. And that's an oversimplification. I love a lot of Californians. I love the state of California. It's very beautiful. But a lot of my problems, everybody I know who lives on a ranch has had their California neighbors, because that's who's moved to Austin, to the Texas Hill Country, call the police on them when they shoot their guns even a mile away. And it's a reign of terror. And that's basically what happened to this gentleman. We're getting him on the line. Going to talk to him in a second. But a lady going by the name Swiss Mountain, I wanted to hear from South Africans, black South Africans, white South Africans, human beings who've lived in South Africa in the hellish stuff that's gone on there, and get your real perspective on Nelson Mandela. And we were about to go to break, but she was talking about how bad apartheid was as well, to give that perspective. So living there and watching apartheid, you were trying to make a point. Swiss Mountain calling from Switzerland. Go ahead and finish up.
Yeah, well, I mean, the amazing thing for white South Africans was that you had help in the house that were black. Women that worked in the kitchen, for example. And I grew up with these people and with their children. And under apartheid, their children were not allowed to be with them. They had to go back to the townships. And my mother was against this. And we had several visits from the police where she just didn't allow them inside. So then you had your pass laws where black people had to carry their papers on them at all times and could be searched anywhere. It really wasn't a nice system to be under if you were in the wrong skin color category. So I can understand why people like Nelson Mandela got really, really annoyed at this. I don't agree with his methods in the least, nor do I agree with Umkhonto weSizwe or any of those organizations that they started up. I mean, they also had their fair share of child soldiers and misery that they spread. But the fact of the matter is you can't really have a libertarian system there, because every single African tribe in South Africa has a hierarchy that's based on monarchy. So they know nothing else. And it's going to take a hell of a long time for them to start grasping individual rights and life beyond a chieftainship that has a monarchy above it.
Well, that's what I was pointing out, is that they basically broke Mandela regardless. In 27 years in prison, he was going to be the king of one of the major tribes. The media never points out that he's royalty. I mean, over large areas. This is not like some local chief. It was like actual royalty, and very brutal. And then they bring him in, and then he claims there's all this unity. It's just absolutely trading out one group of controllers for another. And from all the South Africans I've talked to, black, white, doesn't matter, they say South Africa has gotten innumerably worse. Has that been your experience, or is that not true?
Absolutely. It's gone from bad to worse. If you ask black people today, they say, please bring back apartheid, because it was just so much better for us.
So even though it was horrible, yeah. Sorry, go ahead.
No, everybody says they had work, they had livelihood. It was just, that's the great big irony of it, is because now you've got the system of the ANC in power that is so oligarchic in their own right. Of course, they're coupled with the New World Order, make no mistake. There's a lot of little minions there in the ANC government that have a business with a higher agenda. For example, chipping babies. They want to start chipping babies in hospitals in Johannesburg, I think. They want to put e-tags on your car if you want to drive on the highway. All of these
Amazing.
things.
Well, we're going to have to open the phones up again when I get back to Austin soon, and open the phones up for folks to call in from South Africa and also other regions, because the great thing is we have so many listeners around the world. We can get a real perspective from people. So God bless you, Swiss Mountain, for calling in. And that's what I love about our listeners. These are real thinkers. It's not Mandela good or Mandela bad. It's not. No. It's much deeper of like what's really going on, what's really happening. because the West didn't go in and get rid of apartheid to help South Africa. They went in so they could absolutely strip any laws out and make everybody slaves. And that's my point is, and then we're going to our guest. Take what just happened in Ukraine. Ukraine voted to not enter the European Union, even though they'd wanted to for a decade. And the EU was ready to bring them in because they've seen that the EU is actually there to loot countries and literally steal everybody's pension funds, which they've done in Greece and Spain and Portugal and everywhere else, because the documents came out. That's what it was set up for. So then they're like, oh, you're run by Russia now. Well, no, I don't think Ukraine should be under Russia or it should be under the EU. It should be under the people of Ukraine. It's the same deal. They did not go with the EU because they love Russia. The Ukrainians hate the Russians. They used them pretty much as slaves and killed 10 million of them and all the rest of them. That's white people killing white people. Man, it's the same story over and over again, just different skin color. And they'll use an excuse, well, you're a Ukrainian, so I can kill you. I mean, it's just like they'll have Christians, get killed by Muslims in Africa or whatever. It's the same people, same genetics. They just or one group's animist, one group's Christians. They kill each other. We need to have a culture of liberty, regardless of what color we are, of human liberty, and then that's our gang. Because we do want to be in tribes. Well, I'm in the tribe of liberty, and I don't care what color you are. If you are having your rights violated, I'm going to come to your aid because I want people to come to my aid. I mean, where's the special interest for the individual? Where's the special interest for families? Where's the special interest for business owners? Where is it? I want real unity around liberty. And it's the only future we have, folks. And that's why they attack the Bible so much, because it's all in there if we'd follow it. People say, well, the religion's done all this. That's people twisting it.
Now you can watch the InfoWars Nightly News streaming live as it happens for free.
Check it out at Infowars.com/show.